Hello, my Web3 fellow citizens, law advocates, and legal professionals. I am delighted to welcome you to the third online meetup in the Web3 and law community. Our first meetup conducted in English. We are firm believers that the industry can only be built from the bottom up, from the community, and I'm thrilled that you are all part of this community. So thank you for joining us today. Well, so we are switching to the next speaker. Is Sergey Ostrovskyi. Let me give him credentials. He is Web3 and tech lawyer. He's co-founder and partner of Aurum law firm. He's co-founder of DAObox. He's serial investor and entrepreneur. He acts as an independent director on the boards of crypto companies, and he advises governments on the implementation of the VASP, Virtual Assets Service Providers, if I'm not mistaken, regulation. So, Sergey, if you are with us, you are aiming to give us a speech about entitled DAOs in 2024, Legal Frameworks and Wrapper. If I'm not mistaken, just join us and deliver your speech and give us some time for the end. So join us please with your mic and video if you want to turn on the camera or just by voice.
So I'll start with a couple of words about myself. So I'm a lawyer. I've been working with crypto, with Web3, blockchain since 2017, like early 2017. And as lawyers, we've done pretty much like all kind of stuff that lawyers do in crypto. We've also launched our portfolio project DAObox like a while ago, that specializes in services for DAOs, Web3 collectives, and Web3 organizations, mostly related to DAO wrapping and DAO wrapper administration. So yeah, let's go ahead. Oh, it works. So I thought that we that we should start with some like basics. So what is a DAO legal wrapper? And also, yeah, if you have any questions, just post them in chat. So what is a legal wrapper in the first place? It's a legal entity that a DAO can use to operate within existing legal systems. So as any DAO, like any DAO is a collective of people who like join their efforts to achieve some sort of goal, for example. So, and by itself, this organization can already come into existence, and from legal standpoint, it can already be like qualified or classified, like sort of, yeah. So, and we need a legal wrapper so that the law doesn't qualify our organization as it sees it, and so that we can elect how to have our organization like legally determined, structured, and operated. So the main purposes for which a DAO would normally need a legal wrapper is limited liability for its members, because it's one of the like major concerns that the DAO and their members are facing, is that unlimited personal liability of DAO members. So essentially, there were cases in US when even by holding a single token, a person could be liable for the whole debts of the whole organization. And the token, it wasn't even necessary for that person to buy that token in the first place. So somebody could just drop it to the wallet and that would be enough, which is crazy. So yeah, limited liability is like number one concern. Number two concern is taxation. So we need to optimize taxes, because if we don't have a legal structure in place, if we have a partnership, if we have like individuals engaging in DAO related stuff in their own name, on their own behalf, they're risking their own property and they're risking their own taxes and tax liability. That's why people tend to use wrappers to also organize in terms of taxation. And number three is separate legal personality. So it is something that people want to use the DAOs for, is to own property, own IP, enter into contracts, engage people, issue grants, own like fiat payment accounts and so on and so forth. And to do so, you need a separate legal personality. So you need an entity that can acquire liabilities and can acquire rights and exercise those rights. So those are like three major considerations that cause organizations to set up legal structures. And key considerations when you're doing so is, number one, centralization. You don't want your organization to be more centralized because of that legal wrapper. Number two is checks and balances. So you want like a good governance system to be set up within that wrapper to avoid manipulations or to avoid the management like taking over that wrapper and its assets, which is also a risk when a DAO assigns some property to the wrapper and its management just like takes over that property and just acts in bad faith. And number three is DAO assets, which I've just covered already. So yeah. Then what are the major DAO types? If we're talking about legal structure, the DAO can be unstructured or entity-less. It's any like DAO or Web3 organization that has no legal structure. So when you like organize yourselves, when, for example, a community is created around a project, it could already be viewed as an unstructured DAO, as a DAO that has no legal structure in place. Then we have partially wrapped DAOs. Those are the DAOs in which not the whole DAO is being wrapped, but only some siloed functions or siloed, how to say it, like functions. Yeah, for example, a DAO wants to issue grants, and to do so, it needs to enter into contracts, conduct KYC and due diligence on the grantees, and engage in other like kind of transactions for which you would need a legal entity. So the DAO would wrap only the grant-related like activities, and not the whole DAO. And then, for example, they could use a trust, or they could use an entity set up somewhere where it's like feasible to manage that grant program. And the whole DAO, the bigger organization, it will stay unwrapped. So that's partially wrapped DAO. And a wrapped DAO is a DAO where normally members of the DAO become members of the entity, members of the legal wrapper itself. So the wrapper effectively absorbs the DAO, I would say. So those are three major types depending on the legal structure. Then we have distributions. So the legal wrapper, it can be for-profit or non-profit. For-profit are those wrappers that can... So the key difference between these two is whether the wrapper can distribute assets or property among its members. So if the DAO is non-profit, it cannot make distributions to its members. And if it's for-profit, then you have to pay taxes, but you can do those distributions. So that's the difference. And these two like different kinds of entities, they suit different DAOs depending on their purposes and on what they intend to do with that wrapper. And then we have management, and I also have like two categories here. It's member managed and algorithmically managed. I actually stole it from Marshall Islands DAO LLC Act, but it works. This classification works, so I've added it here. So we can have member managed DAO is a DAO where members exercise governance through voting, normally through voting. So they have like a governance token, they have snapshot, they can vote on snapshot, and then that resolution becomes effective, and so on and so forth. And algorithmically managed is a DAO that operates through smart contracts without voting. Yeah, so those are the two types. So there are like several forms of legal entities that can be used to wrap a DAO from my standpoint, from my perspective, because I think that in order for an entity to like be suitable to be used as a wrapper, it has to meet like certain criteria. And so not like a normal corporation that has shareholders. In my opinion, it cannot be a DAO wrapper because it has shareholders, and like management of that corporation or of that company will have fiduciary duties to the shareholders. So shareholders effectively control the whole wrapper, and it has like nothing to do with the DAO. This is my opinion. So yeah, we have like several kinds of organizations or like entities that can be used to wrap a DAO, and I'm talking like in this presentation, in this speech, I'm talking more about large DAOs rather than small DAOs like Invest DAOs that can have like 10, 15 people or members. I'm talking about large DAOs like protocol DAOs, like ecosystem DAOs, and so on. So yeah, we have foundation, association, trust as standard forms of legal wrappers to wrap the DAO partially. This is when the wrapper does not absorb the DAO itself, but just wraps some specific siloed operations within that DAO. For example, grant, for example, to engage contractors, to own IP, to manage infrastructure, manage AP, and so on and so forth. I also added companies limited by guarantee. Why? Because they can have no shareholders, as I mentioned. So since they are like companies limited by guarantee, they can be structured as an entity without shareholders, and which would be then suitable to serve as a DAO legal wrapper. But I haven't had a chance to do that, so it's just like in theory. The foundation, association, and trusts are partial wrappers, and full wrappers are DAO LLC and DLT Foundation. So DLT Foundation is a type of legal entity specific to United Arab Emirates, and this is like a kind of foundation that is specific particularly to DAOs, distributed organizations, but it's quite expensive, it's quite time and resource consuming, so I wouldn't recommend using it unless you have to or you need to. For example, your target market is there, or like your assets are there, whatever. And DAO LLC is another form of full wrapper that can wrap the whole organization. Because in a DAO LLC, whether it would be Wyoming or it would be Marshall Islands or it would be another jurisdiction, the members of the DAO, they normally become the members of the LLC itself. And you don't have to undergo like formalities, like to sign some paperwork to be admitted as a member, or to undergo KYC or screenings or due diligences to provide your documents, whatever. It's enough for you to hold the membership tokens to be recognized and admitted as a member and have your membership rights enforced. So it's pretty cool form of a DAO wrapper that absorbs the whole DAO. Yeah. Okay. Here I've added some legal wrapper considerations. So when we're designing a legal wrapper, whether it would be Aurum or DAObox, DAObox works more with legal wrappers. So yeah, it's mostly about DAObox, where we're looking to establish a legal structure that, as I mentioned, has no shareholders or equity owners. This is important because in this case, the organization can serve a purpose or can be subordinated to the DAO and not to the members. Because if, for example, in a corporation, a member is required or a shareholder is required, that shareholder, that specific person will have ultimate control over the whole wrapper and over all assets of that wrapper. And it can replace or change directors, it can adopt any resolutions it wants and dispose of the assets as it sees, without even discussing it with the DAO. That's why the entity, the legal wrapper, in my opinion, must have no shareholders or equity owners. It must easily integrate into DAO ecosystem. So they have to be like, there has to be some sort of compatibility. And then it can be effectively subordinated to the DAO. So ideally, you want your legal wrapper to be ultimately subordinated to the DAO. So it has to recognize DAO's will and adhere to their resolutions. Then the wrapper should not be adversely affected by the ASP, securities, or tax law implications. So if you're, for example, if you're incorporating a wrapper in Cayman Islands where they have their own VASP legislation, you want to make sure that intended activities of your wrapper, they will not trigger its application unless you want to be registered. So yeah. And for me, the wrapper, it should have no connections with and no nexus in the US in order to avoid application of US legislation and jurisdiction of US regulators. So yeah. Then here we have system of checks and balances, which is also important for a proper design of the legal wrapper, because you always want to have a system of checks and balances to control your management, to control the management of the legal wrapper. Otherwise, it can just usurp the power and just act in their own interests, not in the interests of the community, of the members, of the, like, not for the purposes that were established, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we want to establish a system where the wrapper recognizes the will of the DAO. The management is appointed either with participation of the DAO or upon its consent, where management owes fiduciary duties not to the shareholders, but to the purposes of the foundation or to the DAO, which also allows to subordinate the management in a proper manner. Then, ideally, we want to have a list of reserved matters. Those are the questions or the matters, the transactions in which the wrapper cannot engage unless the DAO has agreed that the wrapper can engage. So for example, if there's like a material contract, the wrapper should not enter into that contract unless the DAO has agreed, has consented to this transaction, which is also important. For example, you want to limit the ability of your management, of the management of the wrapper, to dispose of material property, to transfer IP rights, to transfer domain names. You don't want your management to be able to do so without getting approval from the DAO, from the organization. So yeah, those are reserved matters. Then you can add excluded activities. Those are activities in which the wrapper cannot engage. Then rules for disposing assets and emergency procedures. For example, if management misbehaves, if you have like regulatory compliance issues, something like that, you want to have emergency measures that will be applied in that case to find a fast and efficient solution to the situation that could arise. And other thoughts here, I've gathered like some thoughts from the top of my head that I had about the DAOs. So first is that there can be a separation between the DAO that exists on-chain and the legal wrappers. So the wrapper not essentially absorbs the DAO, as I mentioned before. The DAO can have multiple wrappers. That's the first point. Each of that wrappers can be responsible for separate directions or for separate activities within the ecosystem and own separate property, so on and so forth. So yeah, it's just important to understand. Same wrapper forms in different jurisdictions will differ. So for example, Cayman Foundation and Swiss Foundation will be super different in terms of flexibility, taxation, supervisory roles. For example, in Switzerland, you cannot appoint your own supervisor in the foundation. It will be a state authority. And in Cayman Islands, you can. And that's a big difference. Also, VASP legislation. So yeah, you could have like several foundation options, but they all will be different. Then people in the know, such as VCs, large auditors, and large actors, they tend to avoid working with unstructured DAOs. This is something that we've been seeing like more frequently lately, is that even large DAOs are having like troubles in engaging people in the know if they don't have legal structure in place, because those people who know they don't want to work with unstructured DAOs, as their compliance teams, they prohibit this, their policies prohibit this, they are avoiding legal, financial risks, and so on, of becoming members of the DAO. Yeah. And regardless of whether you're a DAO, a large DAO, or a small DAO, UBO reporting obligations apply. So if you have like 20 plus controllers within your DAO, you will likely have to report them or to fractionalize their ownership. I think that's all. That's everything I wanted to talk about. So now, if there are any questions.
Well, thanks for great diving into this, another form of specific conjunction of Web3 and traditional, I would say, legal frameworks. So, dear attendees, please don't hesitate to ask questions to Sergey about how to wrap your possible DAO into this legal framework. It puts it into the specific, concrete legal framework of any country. By the way, Sergey, what are your thoughts on what are jurisdictions? Because our next speaker is from Luxembourg. And what countries are the most suitable for putting DAOs into their legal framework? What countries in the world do you find the most suitable at all?
Yeah, that will depend. That will depend heavily on all the configurations you want to have. So if you want to engage, for example, if you want to operate a protocol, it will have effect on the choice. If you want to make distributions, it will have effect. If you want to have your DAO members admitted as members, it will have effect. If you want to do, I don't know, it depends on the protocol, it depends on the token status and design, it all depends. But normally the list would include countries like onshore and offshore. So onshore, Switzerland, Singapore, the kind of jurisdictions, and offshore would be BVI, Cayman Islands, Panama, Cook Islands, Marshall Islands, US states. So there are, I think there are 4 states in the US, Wyoming, Vermont, Utah, and Tennessee, I think, that allow for establishment of DAO LLCs. So that's another jurisdiction you want to consider when structuring DAO, but you want to think twice whether you want to establish presence or nexus in the US, because regulatory climate is very, very complex there. Okay.
We've got a question from Rostislav. Rostislav, thank you for supporting with excellent question. Your chance to be the brilliant. I'm insisting that we need to give a sort of beige for Rostislav for the best question ever asked in our meetup. So he asks, Sergey, do the DAO, which is incorporated in the state of Wyoming, has a locus standi as a sort of a legal term in Latin? I don't know what does it mean, but I hope you do.
Yeah, it's about whether the company can appear in state authorities or in court and have be represented. Yeah.
He clarifies, capacity institute. So read his clarification.
So yes, of course, it has because it is a full-fledged legal entity. So it has legal personality, and it can have acquire rights, acquire obligations, and it can initiate lawsuits and so on and so forth.
Well, Sergey, I like to ask provocative questions. Sorry for my plain crypto-anarchist lexicon, but for me personally, an entity named DAO wrapper looks at first sight as an endeavor to create a sort of oxymoron, because these both entities are tools for different words with completely different law system on the philosophical level. And from my side, they can't be conjuncted. It's like trying to connect inconnectable. Could you please explain why I am possibly wrong in this issue?
Yeah, the thing is that those two worlds, they can coexist if you want to. So you can keep all your stuff on chain if you want to take that risk, and if you don't need to engage in real world operations. But as soon as you need to engage in contracts, as soon as you want to protect your goodwill, protect your IP, protect your domain name, or open fiat payment accounts, when you want to engage your contractors or enforce your rights, you will have to face the real world. And when you're facing this real world, you have to play its rules. And so as it would happen with any organization, let's say we have like gathered together like 5-10 people and decided to do something, like to do business, venue, or like some sort of activities. For a DAO, it would look just the same. So people gather on internet just in much bigger scale, but they gather, they decide to do something together, and they can do it as this. You can do it. You will be just treated as a simple partnership, like unstructured partnership that has its legal implications. And if you want to change that qualification, if you want to change that status, if you want to choose your status, you can just form a legal wrapper and say, okay, I don't want that qualification. I want to be this or that. So that's the reason.
Okay, and finally, in the 2 minutes left, could you please clarify again the question about management? At first, the concept of DAO implies having no management because smart contracts have replaced them. And the concept of any legal entity in any legal framework implies having a management, having a CEO. How this possible contradiction from the first sight can be resolved?
Yeah, but how does democracy work then? Democracy is, yeah, it looks like a democracy to me because you have like a lot of people who can vote, each having normally one vote.
Yes.
And they can elect representatives who would be then representing their interests. It's something that happens like pretty oftenly when people appoint delegates. DAOs appoint delegates to be to hold multi-signature wallets and like do some kind of stuff. Yeah. In a similar manner, they can appoint representatives to act as managers of their wrappers, just to, translate the DAO decisions into facts through their, like, I don't know, authority or through their, like, managerial efforts.
Well, I would suggest to call this concept partial management in DAO. Let it be so. DAO with, if you're afraid an absence of management, we have got a partial managed DAO just for you, our happy clients. Okay, I am joking, but nonetheless, these are the amazing topics for conversation. Thank you for joining us today, Sergey.